Welcome to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, a licensed psychologist and grief specialist, here to help change the conversation about grief and build community and connection while we all adjust to this new normal we are living in. This podcast is for you if you are grieving or if you are supporting someone in a season of grief. I'm glad you're here. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Grief is the New Normal. Dr. Taylor here. And we're going to switch it up a little bit today. We're going to lean more into that non-death loss grief space that is definitely holding some weight for a number of my clients, for myself, for family, for friends. So we're going to talk about how do we grieve in a country that's constantly shifting beneath us? How does the state of the world impact our grief? And what do we do with that collective weight of uncertainty, disillusionment, and loss? Because the reality is, grief, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's personal, yes, and it's also cultural, systemic, and collective. And these days, the world is just feeling really heavy. And I think what's been really challenging about the grief we've experiencing in the last 20-ish days is that it's very active, it's live, it's happening day to day, hour to hour. I think that's why so many people were commenting the length of January this year. It felt like day 194 of the year. And that last half of January post inauguration has just felt so heavy and daunting. And that constant feeling that we're just treading water in a storm, waiting for the next wave to hit, and we're exhausted and we don't know when the rescue boat is coming. It just feels really heavy. And so we've got this big overarching theme of grief happening. And then we're also still experiencing regular losses in our day-to-day existence. So those personal losses, while the world feels unstable, it just amplifies everything. The grief of losing a person, a way of life, a sense of belonging, it all just crashes together. Today, we're unpacking how grief collides with politics, identity, and collective change. And we're doing it without toxic positivity, without spiritual bypassing, and without pretending that we're not deeply impacted by the world around us. So, if this doesn't feel like your jam, then you probably want to skip this episode because we're not going to tiptoe around this because this is something I feel passionately about. It impacts me as a human, my family, my community, my friends, my colleagues, my clients. And so we're going to get into it. Every time there's an election, regardless of the outcome, there can be grief on either side. Some people grieve what was lost, some grieve what could have been. And this isn't just about policy, it's about identity, about belonging, about what we thought our country stood for. And political transitions don't just change leadership. They can disrupt expectations, they can create uncertainty, they can reignite old wounds. I think what's hard with this current shift in administration is it feels like a loss of safety, a loss of representation, and even a loss of hope. And we are so exhausted. It's like this grief has been happening, the anticipatory grief since the election results have come in. It's daunting, it's exhausting, it's this heavy weight we've all been carrying. And then inauguration happened, and now we're all just sitting in it, drowning, overwhelmed, and exhausted by what is happening in our world. This feeling that everything is on fire, that there is a lack of support and protection for aspects of what we thought our country stood for, what we thought would be protected and defended. And it just feels like such a heavy weight in our country right now. And I think we just need to let it take up some space. And so that's the intention of today's episode, is just to talk about the weight of grief that we are carrying and how do we take care of ourselves within this space while we're grieving what's happening in our world, as well as like, how do we take care of ourselves while we're in this, because other things are going to continue to happen and impact us. One of the complicated things with grief is that it compounds, it can become multi-layered because maybe you're not only grieving your personal losses, we're also holding this collective grief of the weight of the world that feels like it's slipping further away from what we once believed in, what we thought it would be, what we thought it represented. Maybe you're feeling disenfranchised, like your grief, your concerns, your lived experiences don't matter, that they are being voided. Some of these executive orders have voided certain existences, and that's unacceptable. And there's so much pain and fear there and grief there. And that's those bigger sweeping impacts. And it's leading to a lot of grief and fear and complicated feelings. And while holding that of what's happening in our world, while also handling our own personal losses, whether it was a person, maybe we got let go from a job, or we're moving and leaving a community, or we got a complicated health diagnosis. We have these other personal losses we're experiencing while also the world feeling like it's on fire and not going in a positive direction. Without having tools or space to process these complex feelings, we're going to burn out. We're going to have more unresolved grief, more rage, the deep pain that we're all experiencing right now. So, grief asks this question: who am I now? Because we're in this new normal, because who we were pre loss, they don't exist anymore for a number of different reasons. And so we ask that question, who am I now? And then we also need to ask the question, who are we now? Who are we as a country, as a society, as a people? And when the answer feels murky, divided, and painful, it is incredibly unsettling. It shakes the ground beneath us. And for many of us, our identity as an American or as part of a particular community feels even more fragile than ever. And maybe you felt a sense of belonging slowly slip away. Maybe you felt betrayed by systems you once trusted. Maybe you're grieving the idea of what you thought our country was, what you hoped it could be. And if you're feeling that loss, I want you to know it's real, it's valid. You're not crazy, you're not overreacting, you're not being too sensitive. You are actively grieving the changing landscape of our country. And it isn't just political, it's deeply human. So, what do we do with that? How do we grieve what feels like a loss of identity on top of our own personal grief? First, let's name it. Collective grief is real. And the more we acknowledge it, the less isolated we feel in it. We lean into those community spaces, those safe spaces where we will feel seen, heard, and known and validated. And if you're feeling heavy, frustrated, disconnected, you are not alone. Second, we find small ways to re anchor ourselves, whether that's grounding in community, limiting media consumption, or creating micro moments of joy or stability or action, finding ways to remind yourself that grief, while yes, it's powerful, it does not have to dictate your entire experience. We can find ways to carry it differently, to move through it in a different way that feels more supportive. We're going to get to that in just a minute. And then finally, let's also talk about emotional boundaries. Mm. And as someone who is a helper, Enneagram 2, people pleaser, like I'm a therapist, for goodness sake. Like, I feel that pressure to hold the feelings for others. And we need to remind ourselves that it's not our job to hold the grief of an entire nation on our shoulders. You are allowed to take steps back, to preserve your energy, to focus on what is within your control. You do not have to be quote unquote on it all the time to prove that you care. We can, like I said earlier in this episode, right now, we're in this treading water space. We're in active grief, active pain. The different losses keep coming up, they keep happening. And we're figuring out, how do we ride these waves until it's time to act, until it's time to pull ourselves out of the water, because there's a boat here, there's a piece of debris for us to pull ourselves up and out on and get some rest. On a personal level, I got diagnosed with shingles this week, and it's been super painful, and I had a really strong stress response to some things that have been happening and not taking care of myself, and just really want to advocate that it's okay to say no to things. It's okay to rest. Rest can be a sign of resistance. It can be productive. It can be what you need to continue to persist and maintain and do hard things. How do we take care of ourselves when everything is feeling like too much? Let's talk some practical strategies here. One of my favorite strategies that I've talked about before in a previous episode last summer is TIPP, TIPP. Actually, I don't know if I talked about it on here on Instagram, but either way, TIPP. It stands for temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, progressive muscle relaxation. My favorite strategy to help shake myself out of that stuck mental space that I can be in is the temperature. The intention of this is to create a physical state change. Our brains and bodies, they like to maintain homeostasis. And if we are getting stuck in an anxiety spiral or a grief burst, or we're just stuck in the stressy depressies, yeah, clinical term, using temperature as a way to shock our system out of that can be really helpful. So taking a super hot shower, putting an ice pack on the back of your neck, holding ice cubes and doing deep breathing, doing those things that are temperature based, even just going and standing outside can be helpful if it's colder or hotter than what your indoor temperature is. If it creates that physical state change, that can help with creating a shift enough. So it's almost like that grief squid that's stuck to your face can just shoot it up a little bit, shock your system, be like, oh, that's what's happening. I'm having a emotional reaction and I'm stuck in my anxiety. I'm stuck in my fear, anger space, and I can choose to do something differently with it. But we need that physical state change to help shift us out of that. The next one is intense exercise. For me, I can't do a lot of intense exercise just because of health stuff. But what can I do? I can go take a walk. Like earlier today, it was not raining or sad, gross weather. It was really cold, but really clear. And so we went and took the dog for a walk just up and down the road. I was visiting my folks. They're on 5 acres in the middle of nowhere. And we went and walked along the little road for, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes. And it felt so good to just be out in that fresh air. And I was able to come back inside with a different mental focus. And that was really helpful. So if you can even just get outside and move, you don't even have to get outside. Just move your body in a way that feels good and safe for you for 20-ish minutes. Again, the goal is to create that physical state change. Paced breathing, so box breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Doing that over and over again, it helps with calming your body down. It's focused on the counting, the hold, the inhale, the exhale, and it can, again, help with calming down your nervous system. And then the last one, this one I do or suggest for my clients to do at nighttime if they're having a lot of ruminating, spiraling thoughts, is utilizing progressive muscle relaxation. You can go on YouTube and find some free guided progressive muscle relaxation exercises, and it can just help with that. Again, calming down your nervous system, creating a physical state change where you're able to turn some things off in your mind, calm it down, and continue to move through your day. So that's TIPP is a great resource. Again, temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, and progressive muscle relaxation. Another helpful thing for some of my grievers and clients is I like to use rage writing, where you set a timer for 10 to 15 minutes and you just let yourself free associate all the angry thoughts. Even if you're just writing blah, fucking blah. Sorry for the profanity. I know I usually don't use profanity on my show. We are today writing blah, diddy, blah until your thoughts pick up again and letting that anger expression out, because there can be some relief because our brains, they think that we need to cycle through those thoughts over and over because we don't want to forget something important. And that can happen similarly with emotions. And so if we're setting a specific time to do the exercise, don't do this right before bed because you might get stuck and not be able to get unstuck out of your rage spiral. So don't do this right before bed, doing timed rage writing earlier in the day or in the morning, and then go and do something to re-regulate your system afterwards. So you set the timer, you write for the 10 to 15 minutes, close the journal, put it away, and then go take your dog for a walk, go grab a coffee, go take a shower and just wash that off. Go listen to an audiobook that you just really get into it. Doing something to take care of yourself and reorient, reground afterward, doing a mindfulness exercise. Those things can be really helpful. The biggest thing in this space too, I think, is finding community and connection to endure, right? This is collective grief we're experiencing. And so finding safe places and people to connect with, to talk, to validate, to send ridiculous memes in a group chat when the next executive order comes through. And it's just seriously, like, this is happening again, or ACLU's fighting back and this is what's happening there. And so it's a place to process, to feel connected. And we don't always have geographic access to people who feel safe and like they can support us with where we're at. And that's where texting groups or online group chats can be a helpful space. WhatsApp can be helpful for finding people to connect with, to talk through this, to get some suggestions for what they're doing, to take care of themselves, to remind ourselves it's okay to take care of ourselves. All that stuff is so important. So those are my 3 big thoughts there. So, as I wrap up today's episode, grief is not just personal, it's collective. And if you're feeling the weight of it right now, that makes sense. It's valid, it's human. And I hope you know that even in the mess, even in the exhaustion, you are allowed to carve out a space for yourself to grieve, to rest, to reconnect with what still matters to you. I'd really love to hear how this conversation resonates with you. Have you noticed collective grief showing up in your own life? Let me know. Send me a message. hello@griefisthenewnormal.com. Share your thoughts. Remember to be kind to yourselves today. Take care, and I'll see you next time. That's it for today's episode of Grief is the New Normal. If this conversation resonated with you or you think it might benefit someone else, please share it. Sharing can open doors to healing, understanding, and normalizing these griefy conversations. If you're craving deeper insights or ongoing support, consider signing up for the Grief Gap newsletter. It's packed with resources, tips, and personal stories to help you navigate your grief journey. Visit the website www.griefisthenewnormal.com to subscribe. For those who prefer a more personal touch to their healing process, check out my grief journal, Authentically Unapologetic. It's designed to help you explore your grief on your own terms, with prompts and exercises that encourage reflection and growth. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, and I look forward to our next meaningful conversation. Our soothing tunes are provided by the Datacorns. If you're interested in sharing your story, collaborating, or learning more, please email me at hello@griefisthenewnormal.com. You can also stream the episodes on YouTube for more engaging content. Until next time, keep exploring your grief with intention and support, remembering you don't have to do this alone.